That's right, on today's video we will be looking at the UGREEN NAS DXP4800 Plus. Now, full disclaimer, UGREEN did send this unit over for review. They've also supplied some additional hard drives for me to be able to configure it, but my thoughts and my views will be my own. I will also be comparing this NAS to other turnkey solutions in a similar price point, just to give you a bit of a comparison of what one is the best bang for buck. Now, previously, this UGREEN NAS was available about 12 months ago as a Kickstarter campaign, and a lot of YouTubers were doing reviews at that point. But obviously, for many countries, including my own in the UK, you could not actually pick it up unless they supplied you one. Now, that has changed. So significantly now, you can actually buy this particular device on Amazon UK. You can buy it on a lot of European Amazon stores as well. And also UGREEN have now gone to market on their website, and you can go and pick one up right now. Anyway, what I wanted to do is cover it off. We'll start with a bit of an unboxing and we'll talk about the specs. So let's talk a little bit about what we're going to get inside this box. Now, the UGREEN NAS is part of the NAS Sync family, as you can well see. And this particular device is the Plus version, which gives us some additional network interfaces, which I'll talk about in a moment. But what I wanted to look at is the CPU that it has inside. Now, the CPU is an Intel Pentium Gold. It is a 12th generation CPU. It's actually the Pentium Gold 8505, which gives us 5 cores and 6 threads running at 4.4 gigahertz. That's not bad performance to get in a turnkey NAS solution. Now, from a perspective, like I mentioned earlier, this was originally funded on Kickstarter, and it was actually the highest funded NAS product that was ever available and run in a Kickstarter as of today. I think it raised something over 6.6 million US dollars, which is pretty outstanding. Really good to see new players coming into this kind of turnkey NAS solution market. So going back onto that processor, now the good thing is the actual TDP for this as it's standard is only 15 watts. Now, I've definitely had it idle around 25 with some hard drives in, but the max turbo power for these is around 55 watts. And again, I've seen wattage around 60 watts when I've been building the array, so to speak. Now, the good thing is with the unit is you also get 8 gigs of DDR5 supplied with the base unit as you get it. That is upgradable to a maximum of 64 gig. Now, that is the maximum supported by the processor that sits inside. Now, the other good thing is this does have Intel QuickSync. So what we could do is run media agents like Jellyfin, I'll talk about Plex a bit later, to absolutely host your media on and run it from within the UGREEN NAS system. Now, the power supply that you get with this is, as you would fully expect, an external one. Now, it is rated at a maximum of 150 watts, so it's given us plenty of headroom for what sits inside here. So if you're starting to use some very large drives, then you've absolutely got that headroom there to be able to do it. Now, the total supported storage for this particular device is 112 terabytes. So if we put that into real terms, that's probably the equivalent of around 76,000 plus films, based on each one being around 1.5 gigabytes. You're not going to have a media library that large, but it just gives you an idea of the capacity. Now, all of that with a maximum data throughput of 1,250 megabits per second really shows you the available headroom on here. Obviously, that's dependent upon the drives and the file types you're accessing. So when it comes to I/O, I just want to cover this off. At the front, obviously, we've got the power button. We've got an SD card reader, USB-C 10 gig, and a USB-A 10 gig. Now at the rear, what we have is the 2 network interfaces, the left one being 2.5, the right being the 10. We've got USB 2s, a USB-A 5 gig, and a HDMI 4K output. But we're not done there. Now, underneath, what we have is a hatch, which I'll open in a second, which gives us access to 2 M.2 drives. By opening this up, we do get access to those M.2 drives and the memory, which, like I said, is fully upgradable. So these aren't the only two M.2 drives either. There is one which the host system sits on, which if you want to access that, you can take the whole back off and basically get to it. So UGREEN have another trick up its sleeve when it comes to these M.2 NVMe drives. They are both 4x4. The other beauty of them is that unlike some other turnkey solutions, you do not need to buy ones manufactured by UGREEN to be able to utilize these as storage. Now, from my perspective, I'm going to utilize these for cache, but you've got both options there. You're not locked down to proprietary drives that are made by that particular manufacturer. So in this case, UGREEN, to be able to utilize them as intended. So you do also get supplied these pretty useful, nice and handy thermal pads to actually install on your NVMe drives to stop them overheating, which then would bond to the bottom plate. Very useful to have these included free in this solution. So we'll just pop the under plate back on. And like I said, what you can do on this also is, if I wanted to, I could remove the full back cover and I could get to the 128 gig SSD drive that sits in there. Again, it's an M.2 one. And what I'd be able to do there is, if I wanted to run my own individual OS, so I could use the likes of TrueNAS if I wanted to. I could plug a USB drive into the back of this and use Unraid. Now, UGREEN have been very, very good in allowing people to do that and it not invalidate their warranty, which is, again, quite unusual for many organizations to do. But to enable this and not invalidate the warranty is pretty fantastic. So the drives that were sent to me were these 4 terabyte Iron Wolf drives. I'm basically going to show you how these are installed on these because it has a toolless design. Now, I've seen toolless designs in the past that have been really painful to utilize, but I actually quite like the UGREEN version. Now, the UGREEN design basically has a clip at the back, which all we need to do is clip out, as so, and we should be able to pull it away. And then these little slots that we just align up and basically push the drive in, as so. And then we're good to go. And then usually just put it in on the rails, clip it in, and away you go. And then we'll just repeat for the final few drives. So bay 2, 3, and finally bay 4. Now, the eagle-eyed amongst you would notice the little slit in the very bottom there. You do get provided a key which enables you to lock these. Now, I have heard some people say that, well, it's not very secure. I could do that with a screwdriver. But let's be honest, you're not likely to have your drive stolen from your own home lab solution or your home NAS storage and then not actually take the whole drive itself, because that's ludicrous. I would get this in an enterprise type grade solution, but from a home perspective, this is more than secure. It will just prevent accidental removal of drives, which is probably what its intended use case is. Now, that's covered off the hardware side of it, which is, like I said, it's actually a really nice feeling chassis. It's made of aluminium. It's a very good construct. It doesn't feel plasticky like some other turnkey solutions out there. But what I wanted to do now is actually look at how intuitive the UGREEN operating system is compared to others. Now, you can use it on your mobile. There is an app that you can basically then go and configure. What I'm going to do, though, is just cover it through the web portal because that's how most people will be used to configuring devices from. So let's just have a quick look at the UI. And what we'll do is we'll be presented with the welcome to UGREEN. Now, you will get a lot of prompts as you come up about accepting the user agreement. That's pretty standard. And what it's going to want us to do is basically set up a username and password. So I'm just going to go ahead and do that and then skip on. You're then presented with the UGREEN cloud account option. Now, this is optional, but it does enable remote access. So if you want to set this up, feel free. You will then get the option to schedule the system updates. So you see there, it's already set at the recommended level, and also potentially send optional device statistics and analytics to UGREEN. Now, at the moment, I've just decided that's absolutely fine because what I want to be able to do is help with the support of this UGREEN operating system platform. That's just going to go away and build everything we want it to do and get the device ready and initialized for us to be able to do additional configuration. Now, this whole process takes around 5 minutes, and eventually you will get a starting service option, which will come up. You may have to do a force refresh on your web GUI. Now, if you're setting it up via the mobile phone, it just seems to refresh quite standard and moves on fairly seamlessly. So once you're finally in the system, you will be presented with some nice little user interface guides, which will give you a bit of a tour and show you around the platform. So again, if you've already set this up, you can just kind of skip through, but it gives you a nice indication of where everything sits. So quite useful to just to have a look at this, because when it comes to any UIs, it's nice to kind of get a little bit of an educational walkthrough and how they're set up. Now, what it's going to necessarily now do is move on to the kind of storage management area, because what we want to be able to do is set up our first storage pool. Now, as you can see with mine, I've got those 4 4TB drives, and I've also got the 2 512 NVMe drives that are available for cache. So it does give us a few options. Most of them are pretty standard in this kind of area now, where you've got the option to have just a bunch of disks, whether it's a RAID 0, RAID 1, RAID 5, RAID 10, RAID 6, those kind of things. They're all available in here for you to go and select. Now, I'm going to set up a RAID 5 because I'm quite happy with just having one drive as my parity. Now, what will happen is I'll then be able to set the file system, and the options here are ext4 or BTFS or BitTorrent file system. Now I'm going to select the BitTorrent file system, and then I'll be able to go and build my storage pool. Now, again, when you build any storage pool in any kind of RAID solution, there will be some time involved. Now, for mine, it took around 6 hours to build this. Your mileage will definitely vary depending upon the size and speed of the drives that you're actually working on, and also the RAID selection options that you've presented. Now, you will see it does ask for password verification to go off and set any of this off. You're not just going to accidentally do it without meaning to. So now I want to go and create my SSD cache pool. And it took me a little while to find this, but basically finding the drive and clicking use and then selecting create an SSD cache will present you with the following screen. Now, what I'm able to then do is, based upon what I'm looking for, so in this case, I want, a cache drive. What it will basically tell me is I must have 2, which is fine, because what I'll be able to do is select the other drive, and it will actually go through and build the cache for me. And this is a good thing to do while the other main storage pool is building away. All I need to do is enter the actual size, which is, the maximums mentioned there. You can obviously tweak this to your own settings. Click next and let that run through. And obviously, in most cases, it again will prompt for the password, just to make sure that you're not doing something again you shouldn't be doing. So while that storage pool is building away, we'll just have a quick whistle-stop tour around the control panel. So in the control panel, you've obviously got user management. You've got the different file services up there. So SMB, FTP, NFS, rsync, WebDAV, and some advanced settings in there to go and play around with, which again, it's nice to have. You've also got the device connection and LDAP if you want to use it, terminal interfaces, and then different settings around your hardware and power. So this is where you can really tweak the kind of performance and, the kind of throughput of power that you're going to utilize. So if you really want this to be energy efficient, you can crank it down a little bit, but lose a little bit of performance. But either way, it's nice to have those kind of settings there and be able to deliver on this. So you've also got time settings that you can change and bits around the network. If you want to configure your network slightly differently, you've got the ability to go in there and do that. When it comes to security, the good news is now it does support MFA. It didn't support this in the past, but now it does. It does also have some additional firewall settings in there, and you can basically install and deploy certificates to it as well, which is really useful to have. But the good thing is that is the kind of nice, simple, clean interface. I imagine as time goes on, it's certainly happened over the last year, that there'll be some additional improvements when they upgrade the firmware and the actual software OS that's deployed into the solution. Like the good thing is as well, it does have a nice little task manager. A lot of NASs do have these days, but it's nice to be able to kind of see your current stats, what's running. At the moment, I'm obviously not doing an awful lot because it's just basically building the storage pool at present. So that is the two-factor authentication I mentioned. Now we can also go to the App Center. Now the App Center in itself has a reasonable amount of applications. It doesn't have everything. You will notice some of the big ones missing off here, like the likes of Plex at the moment doesn't have a native app, but you certainly have Jellyfin. So you can absolutely use it that way. However, there is Docker. So you can deploy Docker and then basically utilize any kind of Docker service, and any Docker container that you want to build off the back of that can absolutely be built within the system. It does also support virtual machines, which is interesting, and I may look at that in the future and do a follow-on video on that one. But it's just nice to be able to see where most kind of turnkey NAS solutions are starting to push now is the additional features that you can actually build out into the platform itself. So one of the really cool features about the UGREEN OS is the Photos app. Now, this is something that's obviously had quite a significant amount of development, and it does have some AI models built into it that you can enable or disable. Now, if I just kind of show you, if we go into AI settings, for example, we've got some in here that kind of are quite simple and straightforward to understand. So you've got people recognition, so you can basically get the value to be set, and then you can select the amount of photos to basically use as, to train your model. You've got text recognition, which will be able to pull text out, and I'll show you that in use. You've got the similar duplicate photo, scene and object recognition, pet recognition, automatic recognition of potentially sensitive content. I better not turn that one on. And image recognition and model training package. So you've got all of those to be able to basically play with. Now, if I just take one that I want to look at. So this is a really old picture of me when I used this with my very first brand, which was basically to have the tech tips bit in, which I've since dropped. But what I can do with this is, since I've turned on the text model, let's just click on that, and you can see it's just pulled out of there from my t-shirt or from my hoodie that Express IT Tech Tips. So again, it kind of shows that nice OCR functionality that it's got built into the platform utilizing AI. So what about the competition? I did say I would basically look at some other turnkey solutions to compare to the UGREEN NAS. Now, obviously, there's plenty I could have chosen, so please don't be offended if I haven't picked your favorite. But what I'm going to do is look at and compare it to the Synology. I'll use the 923, for example, and the Ubiquiti NAS Pro. The two very different suppliers, but they are kind of not a million miles away when you look at the kind of financial ballpark of the UGREEN NAS. Let's have a quick look at those. So if we have a quick look at the UNAS Pro, now it does have 7 drive bays compared to 4. And from an interface perspective, it has a 1 gig and a 10 gig interface. The one thing really letting this down, though, at the moment is actually the operating system itself. Now, I'm a big UniFi fan, but in reality, it's nowhere near the level of some of these other turnkey solutions. So I can't really count this in any way, shape, or form, apart from the fact of it does have more drive bays. So if storage space is your biggest winner, then maybe this is a better solution for you. However, it won't have some of the more advanced features that you'll see from UGREEN. So we can probably rule out the UNAS Pro if you're looking for a full turnkey solution that's not just a data store at the moment. Now, that's not a bad reflection on Ubiquiti or the UniFi platform itself. It's just that is their generation 1. Much like UGREEN, who are obviously new to the NAS scene, as is UniFi. UniFi are known for more networking devices and those kind of peripherals. So to actually move into that area, basically they've just rehashed the MVR product to basically do their UNAS Pro. Now, it's still a very good solution, but I think pound for pound, there's a difference. There's quite a major switch to the difference between a 4-bay NAS solution that necessarily would compare with the Ubiquity solution and UGREEN's NAS offering. So let's look at a different one, which would be Synology. So we'll look at the 923 Plus. Now it's a lot older model, but let's just have a bit of a quick overview of that. So much like the UGREEN device, it is a 4-bay NAS. However, the big difference with this one is, yes, it has similar type caddies. So you do have the toolless design, which is quite nice. The big drawback, though, is that these just generally pop in and out. And I usually have real frustrations with them because they pop out while you're trying to do stuff, which is not ideal. The other part about this is the rear. Now, you'll notice there are 2 network connections on there. However, there is also a blanking plate, and I want to talk about that. So this is my bugbear. This doesn't come with a 10 gig interface built in like the UGREEN does. Now that shouldn't be completely overlooked because you can obviously go and buy it, but you're then looking at an extra £120 roughly to fit this in. Now the Synology is already at least priced £100 more than the UGREEN. So that's just something to bear in mind. It's also a little bit more plasticky feeling than the UGREEN version. However, obviously what Synology has over UGREEN is the fact that their DSM product, so their operating system, has been around a lot longer, is a lot more refined than UGREEN's is at present. However, I imagine over time things will change. So that's just something to bear in mind between the two. However, the major difference between these two is the UGREEN has a much newer CPU. It's around 83% more efficient and 83% more productive than the old Ryzen 1600 that sits in the 923 Plus. But the Synology one that I'm looking at here is an aging device. Now, Synology do have some new stuff coming out later on, which may change the landscape a little bit. The big annoyance I have with Synology ones is around the NVMEs, though. Because what will happen in that scenario is unless you buy the Synology NVMEs, you cannot use them for storage. If you buy any other NVMe drive to put in there, it can only be used as an SSD cache. So let's summarize all of this. If we're going to pick a NAS solution, which one are we going to go with? Now, the reality is any of those 3 would be absolutely adequate to use as a network attached storage device. What you need to look at is what your particular use cases are. Now, when I took on the option to review the UGREEN DXP4800 Plus, I was quite excited because obviously they're a new player in the game. And that's one thing we definitely have to take into consideration. They are not the Synologies of the world. They have not been around for many, many years developing NAS solutions. So to actually get as far as they have within 12 calendar months since their real Kickstarter is quite impressive. They've still got a long way to go to be to the kind of levels of DSM that Synology have, but the future's looking very bright for UGREEN in that particular market space. Now, if we were looking at from a price to performance route, then the UGREEN would definitely be that option. If we were looking for more storage for that kind of price point, then obviously we'd actually go and look at the UNAS Pro, which is something completely different. However, that doesn't have the ability to run Docker images as both the UGREEN and Synology do. For example, you certainly can't host a Plex server on the UNAS Pro at present. Either way, what do I actually think of the UGREEN NAS solution? Well, I'm actually very impressed. Like I said, I've used NAS solutions for many, many years now, and NAS solutions are constantly evolving to the point where you have to do more than just supply network attached storage. To actually really develop and give people the option to use them as mini servers, be able to host file services, to be able to run applications on them is really key. Now, the great thing is with UGREEN as well, as that software develops, if you can't wait, but you actually just want to use the hardware, which let's be honest, for the price point is pretty phenomenal, what you can do is obviously rehash or redesign the SSD that currently sits there, or install your own SSD and basically boot into something like TrueNAS Scale. Or if you're really that inclined, use a Unraid USB to boot in that way. You've got a few options if you can't quite live with UGREEN at present. What is missing off UGREEN? Well, at the moment, the security settings are kind of stepping up. There's certainly some enterprise grade functionality coming into the platform. But one thing it doesn't seem to have at the moment is encryption layers. So encryption at rest, I couldn't find any settings in there to actually run that at the moment. The other piece in there that's missing, which is also missing from the UNAS, is iSCSI. Again, I'd imagine that is going to be coming, but it's just a waiting game. So if that's a really, really important feature to you, then so what? You can run TrueNAS Scale on it and do the same thing. Anyway, that has been my review of the UGREEN DXP4800 Plus. If you have liked this review, one, please hit the like and subscribe. But also, if you want to pick one of these up, there are some links in the description. One of them will be my affiliate link. So if you want to help support the channel, please hit me up on there, because any kind of contribution goes towards running and paying for the bills to make and produce these videos, but also to actually supply the equipment that can hopefully make these videos better in the future. Anyway, as always, I'll see you next time.